So that first call, so I'm got to repeat because of our online folks, Barbara, so I get a name from Trunk or Treat. I actually get a phone number, which would be a miracle probably, but if you got the phone number or an email or a text, so it sounds like that what I want is some individual to call them and say, hey, would you like to get a cup of coffee? What I'm actually saying is I want them to call and say, hey, I'm Bob. I'm from the church. We see you were at our Trunk or Treat. Man, we just appreciate you being here. I hope that was a good experience for you. And I would end, is there anything else we could do to be helpful? Now, friends, this is more intuition than science. Depending on how that call goes, you might then say, hey, would you like to get together for a cup of coffee? Could I text you? But it's not about, would you like to come to my church? The first step is try to build some sort of connection with them personally. And by the way, for everyone I was successful with my own personal life, I probably weirded out 10. Right? I mean, it's just, there's no script. So I'm trying to produce as much script as I can give you, but friends, there's no script other than I almost know what not to do. I'm not quite sure what to do, other than to keep asking, is there anything we can do to be helpful? Could I offer you a prayer? Would you like for me to pray for you? So what he's saying is this is about really forming an authentic relationship. Get out of the sales mode. People smell that a mile away. I'm actually trying to invest some time here. And by the way, you got to help your folks that are making that call. They got to be able to invest some time here. So part of the deal, I'm going to go to preaching, laity and clergy, is there enough margin in your life that if one of those would say yes, that you could actually spend some time and form a new relationship? If the answer is no, then you're being inauthentic as everything, and they'll smell it a mile away. Friends, what's the 10 ways at your church on Sunday that somebody might get acquainted? Not the one way. And if you think your meet and greet time's doing that, talking about in the worship service that's a family reunion thing, trust me. It's you having a good time with your buddies. And us who are guests, after 45 seconds, we're just standing there. Trust me, I do it every Sunday. I'll do it tomorrow at Eureka. Probably not. So I've learned a hard lesson. You cannot make Methodists do anything. No, you just can't. So here's the deal. You got to work with the willing. So if this table here started doing it at your church, it would change the trajectory of your church. Is it going to change the trajectory tomorrow? No, but over a course of time, actually in a church it doesn't take a great big group of people to change the trajectory of a church. It does take time. And it can be enormously frustrating to those of you who are doing it while you watch the rest of them sit around and look and complain. But you just got to get used to it. So when you start doing Jesus work, people complain. If you're going to do church work, you can just keep doing it. But you start doing Jesus work, people complain. So just go with the willing and keep picking up more willing. And so that's why I don't say, go to all your mission stuff and take a step. Well, you can't manage that. Which 2 or 3? So write this down. Tell me about a time recently you have experienced God. Tell me about a time recently you have experienced God. Step 2 in our evangelism, or middle school evangelism, is being able to answer that question. And to begin to ask at your church, and this is hard. Take any group, give me a group at your church that meets regularly. The Quilters. Ooh, could we start with a little easier group than that? So the Quilters, let's start with the Quilters. So the Quilters meet on whatever day they meet at your church every day. What would it look like if before the Quilters quit for the day, you would go around the circle and ask the question? So tell me about a time recently you've experienced God. So the second step is trying to think about the groups at your church that meet, the Bible studies that meet, the meetings that meet, the board meetings that meet, the small groups. And could you imagine asking this question in your church? My belief is if you could get this somewhat pervasive through the folks that meet at your church, you would change the spiritual temperature of your church. Missions happen all the time. So the reason we want you to start practicing look at your mission stuff first over the course of a year, you'll start having people, seeing people through a different set of lenses and eyes through that work. After you've done that for a year, you start in your groups that meet at your church, asking a question. So tell me about a time recently you've experienced God. If you've been doing the mission stuff for a year at your church, where you've been taking an additional step with 2 or 3, trust me, somebody's going to say, you won't believe what happened with the family from the Habitat House. You won't believe what happened when the ones we were given the sack of groceries to, they wanted a prayer, and we actually had a prayer. And you see where I'm going? It gives them some feet to their story, and it gives them a chance to do that. So this is like steps. So don't quit practicing okay, if in year 1 we had 3 mission things we set on in terms of taking more steps, year 2 we're going to do 5 places we're stepping out on, but in year 2 we're starting to ask willing groups, Bible studies, small groups, trustees, and I had the biggest trouble with the choir, but the band, or whatever the greeters, whatever groups you have at your church that assemble. Because what Wesley's genius is every time they assembled, he asked questions before they left. And you knew coming, if you were in his day, I better get me up an answer, because he's going to ask. It's really quite like surgery, don't you think? So Wesley, he has this accountability streak in him that if you're coming to his thing, he's going to ask you a set of questions, and he's expecting you've had an answer because you've behaved that way. So it's a circular thing. We've quit asking. We've got to start asking. So when people come to our stuff, they go, oh, you're going to expect me to. It's it's like using a great question to raise expectations. And so step 2, middle school evangelism, is start asking this question with I did it with some unwilling. It doesn't turn out well. And try to get folks to begin to see through a different lens. Are you with me? That's all I'm trying. Because I'm trying to get them to practice this in a safe place. Because if they can't find their story in a safe place, they're never going to be able to. I'm never going to be able to find my story when I'm a little uncomfortable. Answer the question. What is it? Tell me about a time recently you have experienced God. Because my friend Kendall Waller says you can't give something away you don't have. Until we practice this over and over and over, it's going to be real hard for us to share it with people we don't know very well. Or even with people we know very well, but we're just not comfortable to do it. Any questions about this? And it's going to take a year. You want to practice this for a year. So what are we doing? We're practicing sharing the story in every group we can at church, and we're continuing to take steps with our mission work, which we do naturally, but we're trying to add steps. So this is a step 3 then, and Barbara, you got ahead of me, is if in fact you get some groups of people sharing their stories on a regular basis, small groups, Sunday school classes, whatever, if you continue to trail along and take your mission stuff and start taking steps, you start getting stories like the story I told about Schweitzer. You could go down to Schweitzer today and you'll get all kinds of stories, because they have 3 prayer rooms now. They pray with hundreds of people, and we have hundreds of people who have hundreds of stories of weird, odd things that gone on in just asking that question, would you like to have a prayer? Step 3 is start incorporating into your service on Sunday morning, at least once a month, a testimony of somebody sharing their story. Now, don't do it once a week or you'll scare the Methodists in the room. They'll think you've gone Pentecostal. They'll think you're a holy roller. So be careful. I don't even know if the last church, I didn't even call it a testimony. It scared them. So just somebody's going to get up and talk. But I think we have lost testimony out of the Methodist Church, and we need to get it back. If you go back to our roots in America, and when Francis Asbury was here, he had an exhorter, somebody that was going to give a testimony. So yes, we heard the sermon, but now we're going to hear the testimony. Now, I need your testimony to be 3 minutes or less. Theirs were a little bit longer than that. But friends, third step is teach your leaders to listen for great stories. Videotape the great stories and put them on the screen, but at least once a month, where's the testimony up front in church by a lay person saying, step one was what? Get some missions going where you take a step. Step two, after a year of that, start trying to get your folks to share answer the question. Tell me about a time recently you've experienced God in as many willing groups as you can get to start practicing that practice. Right. So step 4 is graduate. How do you connect with the unconnected? How do you share your story with people out in the real world? And so what we're going to do, we're going to step in. This is going to lead us into the second half of the book. Is just remember this. When you're starting to deal with people outside the church that you do not know, it does not begin by you asking or giving an invitation at the front end of that relationship. I don't want to just feed somebody's belly. I want to change their spiritual direction. I want to do both. I want to change I believe in redeem and rise. I want folks to get better in their life, and I want folks to also get better in their spiritual life. And so remember, the relationship comes before the invitation. If you're going to issue to folks that you do not know very well church, the best way to do that is to have multiple special Sundays where it's easier to bring people than on regular Sundays. This is not new news. Ken Callahan, 25 years ago, said, if you're going to move a church forward in its worship attendance, and by the way, for good or bad, stepping into worship is still the number one place new people step if they step, or into a service project. Those are the two places new people most likely step. It's still true. So what are he called them major Sundays. And so God gives you two already, right? You know what they are, right? Christmas and Easter. What's 3 more you can put together where it's where you blow out the doors, you bring your very best, you do things you can't afford to do other Sundays, and you make it an easy moment for somebody to step into the life of your church. And by the way, this is an inside tip. Folks who organize things are rarely the same folks who follow up on things. Did you hear me? Folks who organize things rarely are the same folks who follow up on things. And we try to make the same folks do both most of the time. So people who organize Vacation Bible School normally very poor at following up on Vacation Bible School for 2 reasons. One is by the time you're done with Vacation Bible School, you are exhausted. You're burnt, you're done. And so we say to them, call all the children Monday. Well, Monday I'm just trying to get my brain back together. And by the way, they're typically organizers or typically not follow-uppers. And so I've learned to say, okay, if that's the group organized Vacation Bible School, where's the 10 people? Their only job is to just hang around and get acquainted with the kids so that they can follow up. If you're going to do a potluck, potlucks are deadly for new people. Deadly. It's one of the most deadly things you can do to turn off a new person is to have a potluck, because you all will have a great time. And the new guests will feel like they're not a part of the deal. Unless, of course, you've intentionally have hangout people whose only job is not to visit. In fact, the rule is you cannot visit with people you know. So get follow-up people. Whatever you're going to do, who are the follow-up people? And what do follow-up people do during the event, whatever the event? If you did trunk or treat, did you have 5 people? Their only job was to hang out. Their job wasn't to have a trunk full of candy. Their job wasn't to set up stuff. They were just hangout people. I'm a great hangout person. I don't have any particular skill set, so I can just hang out. And what's my job for hanging out? I'm trying to meet people. I'm trying to run into people. I get a name, I'm going to turn around and write it down so they don't see me write it down. So that when I call them, I say, hey, I remember you.